UFC Fight 9 Moreno versus Kavanagh is just around the corner, and I'm here to give you guys my prediction for every single fight on this card. Starting off with Pinas versus Wes Schultz. And look, Wes, he kind of has like a Dricus Duplessis kind of style, like striking wise. His striking is, very awkward. I wouldn't say it's as effective as like a Dricus Duplessis, obviously. This guy's just starting off, so obviously not. He is a decent wrestler. He doesn't have that great of a grappling, arsenal. But it's understandable because he started BJJ like around 22. I think he's 29 if I'm not mistaken right now, so it's not, he hasn't been really grappling for that long. Pinas on the other hand, decent gas tank, very good power. He actually trains in the same gym as Jose. Jesus Christ, that wasn't a voice crack, I swear. It's because I haven't drank water. But I already started the video, so I can't stop it. But yeah, he trains in the same gym as Jose Aldo. I really couldn't find footage of his DQ loss, so I can't really tell you nothing about it because I couldn't find footage anywhere from that Q loss. But he fights, like Jose Aldo, high guard, good combinations, very technical. But look, this is actually a very interesting one because on one hand we have Schultz, who is definitely a better wrestler, but Damien is definitely a better striker, obviously, than Wes. But I'm going to pick Damien to win this fight via TKO. But I'm not really confident. I have to say that I'm not really confident on the pick because of the wrestling threat Wes is going to bring. I'm not saying Wes is like some elite level wrestler, but Damien Pinas, like I'm not even joking. He genuinely has really bad takedown. And yeah, man, I just think he does have good defense against the fence. I will say that because he can use his strength there, in open mat, or if you can pull him off the cage, and you can get him down very, very easily. And look, he did have a very bad fight wrestling wise, grappling wise against Johnny Gregory, obviously in the outside the UFC, and Gregory was able to hold him down. The only reason he got up from that was because he somehow, some way got out like a Kimura while on his back, and Gregory had to defend it, so he ended up on top, and then they ended up on the feet, and he was gassed, so he just absolutely annihilated him on the feet. But like I said, man, striking was Damien is on another level, just like Wes's wrestling is on another level compared to Damien. So I'm gonna bank on Damien catching Wes on the feet with like a straight right, hurting him and TKOing him in round one. I will be worried, I have to say, I will be worried if this fight gets past round one, but I'm banking on Damien striking to get and hurt Wes in the first round. Moving on, the second fight of the night, Eric Silva versus Francis Marshall. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Eric Silva is 38 years old. He's 38 years old. He lost both of his fights in the UFC. His last win, his last fight was against Naimov, where he suffered like a leg injury, and his first fight he got eye grappled and submitted. I think the UFC matchmakers made this fight as a send-off for Silva, just to send him off because he's not really a good fighter, and he's 38 years old. They're just putting this man here to make Francis Marshall win this fight. That's basically it, because this does nothing for the division, and I don't even know why they're making this fight. But again, it's UFC matchmaking, who the hell knows. But look, Marshall is a good striker. He did go toe-to-toe with Myron Santos in his last fight. He even dropped him in the first round. He did lose via split decision, but Eric Silva isn't the level or the type of striker Myron Santos is on the feet. Eric Silva will have the grappling advantage on this fight, but I don't see him submitting Marshall Hence why I'm picking Francis Marshall by decision. Moving on to the next fight of the night, Ernesto Kareckaite versus Sofia Montenegro. This is actually, not a bad fight. Like, I'm not even joking. This is actually not a bad fight. I think we're gonna see a good striking match for 3 rounds. I give Kareckaite the advantage on the feet because she beat Carly Judais, who's a very, very good striker. She was on the last card, by the way, against on Strickland versus Hernandez card. I did pick Judais on that card to TKO Miller because the levels on the there was just not even in the same level on the striking wise, but it went to a decision even though she was levels ahead Miller. And I think this fight will be the same. In WMMA, you can be levels above someone in striking and grappling anywhere, and it will still end a decision. And I think that's what's going to happen. Ernesto Kareckaite by decision. Moving on to the next fight, Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Javier Reyes. This is a tricky fight to predict because Douglas has been in there with, some elite fighters, Peter Yan, Leon Murphy, Saeed Magomedov, and he did lose all those fights. He did lose them. But compared to Javier, who's making his UFC debut, it's tough. It really is tough, but I'm picking Javier Reyes by TKO in round 2. I think Douglas, Douglas' last fight in featherweight was back in 2020, where he lost to Leon Murphy. And he's also not that active, and his last fight was back in 2022. And on top of that, he's 40 years old. Not even exaggerating. He's literally 40 years old. The thing is, Silva is not a bad fighter, but in his last fight against Miles Jones, I'm not even joking, he looked like he was starting to get like that old man hunch. You know what I'm like, that hunch the old people get, and he was literally starting to get that. I'm not even turning up a joke. You go see that fight and tell me that he's not getting the old man joke. But look, Reyes is very, very heavy-handed, not as fast as Silva in my opinion, but definitely stronger. I think he gets it done with a round 2 TKO. It could be round 1, but I'm gonna go with a round 2 TKO. I'm gonna give Andrade the benefit of the doubt that he's been in there with the best of the best, and he's going to be able to survive at least a round against Javier Reyes. Moving on to the next fight, Christian Quiñonez versus Chris Moutinho. I'm going to be picking Christian Quiñonez by decision. Chris is a horrible, and I'm not even exaggerating, a horrible striker, and he can only strike with people who are not UFC level. I'm not talking about ranked UFC level. I'm talking about just in general UFC level. The UFC gives Moutinho fights when they want a guaranteed knockout on the card, like against O'Malley or Malcolm Wallmaker. They just bring him in to have entertaining fights, pick him out, and it's basically rinse and repeat after that. I think Quiñonez striking is better. I wouldn't be surprised if he does get TKO'd in this fight, but I'm expecting an entertaining low-level striking match between these two. I'm gonna go Christian Quiñonez by decision, but again, it could happen. He could get TKO'd, but this is probably his last chance on being back to the UFC. I don't care how many times he gets knocked out by these people. I genuinely think this is going to be the last time he gets a single fight or a single fight contract for the UFC, because this cannot keep happening. Moving on to the next fight. Yeah, I'm going to be picking Alian Pérez by a crafty decision. Yeah, sure. Good luck to her, I guess. Moving on to the next fight, Jose Medina versus Ryan Gandra. Medina's gonna get knocked out like in the first minute of this fight, and I'm not even joking. I'm literally not even joking. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. He lost his fight on the Contender Series and still got a contract, then went on a 3-fight losing streak and is still somehow in the company. Like, I have no idea why he's in the company, but at least we know why You know, the UFC sending him off with a bang, and I mean that literally. You know, Ryan Gandra is a very good pressure striker with serious power, like genuinely serious power. And I don't see this fight lasting more than one round. I'm gonna go Medina gets a KO, TKO in round one. He's probably gonna sleep out cold Jose Medina. He's genuinely going to do that. I am 100% confident on that. Moving on, the main card. This is the main card opener right here. Santiago Luna versus Angel Pacheco. And again, it's one of the, you know, Angel Pacheco is one of those fighters who lost the Contender Series, got a contract, and is kept around to fight up and comers like Santiago Luna. Despite Pacheco being 13 years older, by the way, it was 13 years older than Luna, he only has 3 more fights than him. I think Luna's wrestling and grappling are way better than Pacheco's striking was. Luna does get hit a lot, but you know, he's 21. He's still learning, improving. Pacheco doesn't have knockout power, so he doesn't have to worry about, you know, getting hit. I'd give Luna the striking advantage, but not by much. I'm picking Santiago Luna by decision. I wouldn't be surprised again if Luna does get a submission, like a rear naked choke or something. I'm not expecting a knockout by Luna. It could happen because of the age of Pacheco. But yeah, I'm picking Santiago Luna by decision. Moving on to the next fight, Imanol Rodriguez versus Kevin Borjas. You know, Borjas had a really good fight against Joshua Van on the feet, if you guys remember that. He even dropped him. But Borjas is very easy to get his timing. He does have more experience than Rodriguez, and I don't think the odds. I think the odds on this fight are a little bit exaggerated. I think Imanol Rodriguez is like a minus 450. I don't really agree with that. I think this fight is going to go the distance. I think Rodriguez will use his wrestling and will be able to out-grapple Borjas, but you know, most of the fight will be on the feet. I think I see Borjas, well, you know, he's gonna have his moments, but that's pretty much it. I think Rodriguez has more power while Borjas is faster. I think he's gonna be less active and less accurate. He's gonna miss more. Just overall, it's gonna be a Imanol Rodriguez show, basically. Imanol Rodriguez by decision. Moving on to the next fight, Edgar Cháirez versus Felipe Bunes. I'm going to go with Edgar Cháirez by decision. You know, Bunes is not a good fighter. Cháirez is not a good fighter either, but he is better than Bunes. Cháirez trains at the same gym as Michael Morales, if you don't know. I'm expecting, you know, decent grappling match with some scrambles. I don't see Cháirez submitting Bunes. They're about like the same level offensively and defensively on the ground, so they might just cancel each other out and keep it standing. Pérez will be more active and more accurate, getting, you know, a unanimous decision win, in my opinion. This card is just basically set up for Mexican fighters to win, if you haven't noticed, by the way. But yeah, Edgar Cháirez by decision. Moving on to the next fight, Daniel Zellhuber. How do you pronounce that? Daniel Zellhuber versus Bobby Green. I'm not calling that man king. I'm not gonna lie to you, brother. But look, you gotta feel bad for Bobby Green. You know, they're giving in another long, lanky fighter with decent power to starch him. That's all they're doing, you know. The problem with Bobby Green is that his speed isn't there anymore, you know. It just isn't there anymore. You know, he's still a good striker, don't get me wrong, but against fighters with, you know, a big reach advantage against him, he struggles, especially at this stage of his career, brother. It's just kind of sad, you know. His speed has like withered away, you know. He got slipped out cold by Patty and Ruffy. He had a, you know, meh performance against like Lance Gibson in this last fight, but it's obvious that what the UFC is doing, you know, feeding the old fighters to the new one. Like it's just obvious. I was going to pick Zellhuber by decision, but you know, looking at Bobby Green's last few fights, I'm gonna take Daniel Zellhuber. Jesus Christ, his last name is so hard to predict. by TKO in round 2. Moving on to the next fight, Marlon Vera versus David Martinez. Marlon Vera was fighting for a title 3 fights ago, by the way. 3 fights ago, this man was fighting for a title. And now he's fighting David Martinez, a KO artist, on a 3-5 losing streak. If this doesn't scream to you last fight in the UFC, I don't know what does. It's a shame because, you know, Marlon has really good wins in his career. Dominic Cruz, Frankie Edgar, the fluke win against Sean O'Malley. And now we're here, brother. I know Marlon has never been knocked out in the UFC before or in his career, but I think David Martinez has the best chance to do it compared to anyone else he's fought. And that's why I'm going to go David Martinez by knockout in round 3. There you go. Moving on to the main event of the evening. Now, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. Make sure you like. Also, turn that bell on because I am going to be streaming this event. But look, man, I'm not gonna lie to you. You know, Kavanagh is taking this fight on short notice, if you don't know. But this is way too big of a step up, in my opinion, you know. Shout out to him for accepting, though, you know. He just got TKO'd by Charles Johnson 5 months ago, and that loss is aging horribly. Absolutely horrible. Brandon Moreno is just better literally everywhere. More experience, former champion. I'm picking Brandon Moreno by decision. But look, I just feel like the matchmakers went, you know, more for entertainment on this card than competitiveness. And I feel like most, if not all, Mexican fighters should win their fights. I don't know how I feel. This card is, you know, a solid like 6 out of 10. I could probably go down to 5. But it's a 6. I'll say it's a 6. It could go up to 7 depending on, you know, the knockouts that we get, because if it's like a decision fest, you know, how I'm, you know, predicting, I'm pretty sure I picked more decisions than knockouts. I think I haven't really counted. If it's like a decision fest, it'll definitely drop down to like a 4 or a 5. I'm not gonna lie to you, but yeah, it should be entertaining. You know, striking, we're gonna see a lot of striking. That's for sure. We're gonna see a lot of striking. But yeah, man. With that being said, I'll see you guys very, very soon. Goodbye.